Hey, before we get to the podcast, we want to share with you an exciting new way you can help support the podcast.
Yes, we have finally opened a Patreon account. Go to patreon.com/2njb to check it out.
We have 4 different tiers, and they each allow you to support the podcast at a different level, and you get really cool rewards. So go to patreon.com/2njb and help us continue putting out great content for you.
Thank you, guys.
This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
Never a dull day in the Middle East. As Israel is entering another round of elections, Iran is on the brink of getting a new deal which will allow it to become stronger than ever. And as if that's not enough, the entire global economy is threatened by inflation. It is in these delightful circumstances that we invited once again our seasoned guest, Ofir Dayan, to talk about recent events and much, much more. Ofir recently came back from 2 years in the United States, where she was getting a master's degree in international security policy.
5 years.
5 years in the United
I also
States.
did my bachelor's.
But you did your bachelor's, came back, and then went for 2 years. You didn't come back.
I was just here during COVID.
Visit.
You were
but
just here for the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm telling you, it's all worth it.
So you got a master's at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, and you have a bachelor's degree in political science, also from Columbia University. You're a fierce advocate of the Jewish right to visit the Temple Mount, and you're part of the NGO Beyadenu. And you also are a columnist for the Israel Hayom newspaper.
That's true.
Wow, a lot of
Titles.
You are a lot of things.
Wow, that's, like the Middle East, never boring.
Never boring. Never a dull day. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So
Where do we start?
Is it? No, go
Go.
ahead.
What's new in Temple Mount?
Unfortunately, not a lot. And even the things that are new are not as good as one would hope. I think for the last few years, we have been seeing improvements in terms of the numbers of Jews ascending the Temple Mount, the number of Jews understanding the connection between the Temple Mount and their Jewish identity. Gladly for me, and I think for everyone, these people are not necessarily observant. When I started ascending, I remember being struck by being, pretty much alone as a non-observant Jew, and not even to mention a non-observant woman. So I'm really glad to see, my friends who were doubting me at first and saying, why do you need to go there? It's only the crazy people. And now they're asking me to guide them on the Temple Mount. My friends, my family who were super afraid, sending hi from here to my aunt who, for 6 years refused to ascend the Temple Mount. Even after I took her husband and his brother, she was so scared. And one time she came with me, and a few months later, she came back with all her friends from work, and I guided all of them. And they're school teachers in Netanya, not, the typical, what you would imagine a group of settlers storming the Temple Mount.
We need to
as they
explain,
say.
I think, the...
Evangelical Christians or something like that.
Or Ben
Normal
Shapiro.
people.
Yeah.
We need to explain, I think, can you give a small recap of what's the problem?
Yeah, the problem is largely that after 2,000 years that we have been praying to come back to this specific location, we have no idea how to manage it. In 1967, after Israel liberated it, it also decided that it's a quote, we don't need this Vatican. And it handed over civil control to a body called the Islamic Waqf, controlled by Jordan. All its officials are being paid by the Kingdom of Jordan. And they pretty much, set the tone there. So if they see a Jew praying, it offends them. So they tell the Israeli police to go and arrest that person. I even had, I think it was 3 instances of Jews who wanted to get married on the Temple Mount, not even with a chuppah or a rabbi or anything like that, just the brink part, like the bare necessity. And they were arrested. One of the couples got even arrested before performing the heinous act of getting married. They searched the groom's pocket and found the ring and arrested him. So the issue largely is that it's the one place that is most important in Judaism, but Jews are not allowed to pray and worship as they should be, as anyone should be allowed to on the Temple Mount. And my organization, Beyadenu for the Temple Mount, is trying to maybe, get us back to normality, to understanding that Jews, like any other people, have the right to pray in their holy site.
And when you ascend, you're surrounded by cops, and you get violent calls. And
yes. And what's more disturbing to me, I think, is that there's a complete separation between Muslims on the one hand, and then tourists and Jews on the other hand. But even if you're in the
segregation,
lesser,
apartheid.
I wouldn't call it apartheid, because I think that's like a strong term that signifies something very specific in the South African context. But yes, but there are privileged. There is a privileged group, the Muslims, who can enter the Temple Mount in all hours of the day, any day of the week, play soccer, enter the Temple Mount from 9 out of 10 gates. And there are the Jews and the tourists who are allowed to ascend 5 hours a day, only Sunday to Thursday, no weekends, although, the Saturday, the Sabbath, is the holiest day in Judaism, but we're not allowed to enter. And even during the week, only 5 hours, not allowed to pray. And if that's not enough, the tourists and the Jews are separated, so the tourists can roam freely around the compound, while Jews are being herded, for a lack of a better term, by police officers. Well, escorted does not come with walk slowly, walk faster, stay in one group. Don't
You're
move.
not allowed to do
we're not
this.
allowed to. Even like one time, I almost got arrested for shivering. It was so cold, and the policeman thought I was praying because I was moving. I was like, dude, I'm not observant. Even if I wanted to pray, I didn't know how. So I don't know what you want from me.
But I have a question. Okay, we gave it to the Waqf, but legally, it's not ex-territory, right?
No,
the
it's
Israeli
not an ex-territory.
Is valid there, right?
Yes, the Israeli laws are valid there.
So why the Supreme Court doesn't implement the basic freedoms there?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and one that was brought before the Supreme Court on many occasions. People appealed to the Supreme Court saying exactly that, and then the Supreme Court said, right, in principle, Jews have the right to pray there, and they have the right to worship. However, in order to prevent violence, the police should, with caution, exercise its power to maintain public order. But the police abuses that, blank card that it has been given by the courts, unfortunately.
So you think it's not necessarily a bad judgment by the Supreme Court, it's just an abuse by the police?
I think it is an abuse by the police, but I also think it's.
They didn't go out of their hands to.
Yes,
the police, the police in the end are an enforcer.
Right. So I think the bigger issue is not the courts or the police. I think the bigger issues is that our politicians, our elected officials, don't care enough, and that's a proxy of the people, the voters, not caring enough. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do to raise awareness. If people pressure their elected officials and tell them this is an issue we care about, the public officials would
Why do you expect people to care about it?
I expect people to care about it because it's, to me, in my view, it's the heart of Judaism. This is the place, I always think that every group of people, every ethnic group has this one place, this one moment in history where they became a people. And for the Jews, it's the Temple Mount. There is no, question about it. And
Why? Because it's the place where Abraham...
It's the place of the binding of Isaac. It's the place, it's Mount Moriah. It's the place where both temples stood. But maybe even not less important than that, this is the place where, and think about it, the only place where Jews from all tribes, from all walks of life, for all socioeconomic statuses came together during the holidays to worship, and not just to worship, to meet each other, to mingle. Yes. This is the one place where they were all equal. They all, besides with the high priest, had the same status. And this is the one place where during the holidays they could come together with people, with Jews, with their brothers and sisters who they wouldn't have met in any other location. And you know, when I say that, a lot of times people tell me, yes, but you omit the bad parts. You know, there was hatred, there were rebellions, and, infightings among Jews. And to that, I want to say exactly. Being a people is not only about the good parts. What made us a people, what made us a strong group of people, what held us together through almost 2,000 years of diaspora are not only the good stuff, is that we overcame also the hard stuff that happened in this place.
And the Muslims are really disgracing the place?
Yes. So when you ask what's new, I actually wanted to say that, but I didn't want to open with that because that's a recent development that has been very worrying to us. And in recent weeks, we have been seeing a new phenomena of the Waqf garbage trucks just like pouring garbage, their waste all over the Temple Mount, including, and I don't know that, but I would assume that since they are doing it in a very specific place, which is where right in front of the Holy of Holies, I don't think it's an accident that they are dumping it there. So in recent weeks, we have been in recent conversation, and that's the time, you need to say a nice word when it's due. And the Antiquities Authority of Israel has been very cooperative, and we have been appealing to them and telling them, look, this has been happening and it shouldn't. Unfortunately, the police and Homeland Security Ministry are not very cooperative with them. So we try to encourage people to talk to their elected officials, to email the Antiquities Authority, the police, and ask them to stop this.
Who deters us? Like the Hamas, the PA, Jordan, Iran?
Honestly, I think us. I think that we have been talking about all these huge threats and existential threats, and if we allow Jews to ascend the Temple Mount on Tisha B'Av, the Middle East is going to burn. And guess what? There was a record being broken this year on Tisha B'Av in terms of the number of Jews who ascended in Tisha B'Av to the Temple Mount. Almost 2,500 Jews in one day, in 5 hours. Okay? And nothing happened.
Yeah, but no one notices those kind of subtle trends. But the common narrative is, or one common narrative in Israel is that the Second Intifada was kind of ignited by...
Why go so far? But
by Ariel Sharon, who went on to the Mount. But I think the Second Intifada was much more deadly and devastating than the war. Ago. It was much more devastating to Israel than the war a year ago.
You know what? I'm not sure. The war a year ago.
For the long run, I told... Short run...
Hundreds,
we had the third Intifada a year ago, man.
Dozens of people died.
You know what? I agree with you on the short run.
Hundreds.
Long term, I think Noel is absolutely right. What happened here in the mixed cities in Israel for the long run is going to be way more devastating.
Perhaps, but either way.
But anyway, I would challenge
point.
that perception. I would say that Ariel Sharon did not ascend the Temple Mount when the first Intifada broke, or when the 1929 massacre in Hebron took place, or the 1936 Arab riots took place.
No one's
There's
saying that
always
there
an
aren't.
excuse.
No one's saying that there aren't other excuses.
There's always an excuse
for Palestinian violence. No one's saying that there aren't other excuses or that there isn't always an excuse, but they're saying that this is a very good excuse.
Okay, so everything is a good excuse to kill Jews, and we need to get into our heads that no matter what we do,
We'll find a reason to.
they will find a reason to do that, and we can't segregate ourselves into these tiny quarters where we can allow ourselves to live in, and just allow them to narrow those quarters until we're pushed into the sea. What's going to be the end of it? They're going to say, okay, so everyone's in East Jerusalem. Every Jew walking in East Jerusalem is offensive, and it's a reason to kill Jews. And then you say, okay, so no Jews in East Jerusalem. By the way, what they did in Area A, any Jew entering Area A is not okay, and it's provocative. So Israeli Jews, not allowed to go into Area A, is under the Palestinian Authority. So then they will say that about the Temple Mount, and then they'll say it about East Jerusalem, and then Jerusalem overall, and what's going to be with us? We're going to just...
But if we're going to reset the rules of the game...
But no one's questioning that they're going to say it about the rest of Jerusalem. I mean...
Now?
The boundaries haven't moved much.
Now?
No, since 1967.
My family used to shop in Azun, which is the Palestinian village next to my house. They used to go there all the time, and now Israelis are not allowed by law to go there because it's a reason to kill Jews.
It's not A territory.
It is.
That village is A.
Yeah. So, and my parents never imagined that they would never be allowed to enter Azun again, but it happened because someone set a precedent that a Jew walking in Area A is a cause to kill him or her, and we accepted that paradigm, and it was set, and that's it. And I think
and then laws were changed, and now it's illegal to...
And now whenever you go, and you can see these huge red signs outside of every village or city that is Area A saying that that Israelis are not allowed to enter, but you see non-Jewish Israelis go there all the time. It's just another way of saying Jews are not allowed there.
In the salami system.
Right, and I think it's even irresponsible on an international level, not just in the Israeli context. I think that it sends a message to terrorists everywhere that they can threaten people and they will cave in. Even one of the strongest, wheel-powered and militarily strong countries in the world, they can just say what they want, and we take it for granted. We just do it. We follow their crazy demands.
But you're willing to pay a price.
I am willing to pay a price. I think that...
Like even hundreds of dead Israeli soldiers.
Or civilians.
And hundreds of civilians.
First of all, I don't think that's going to be the case.
There's a risk, though.
But there is a risk, and I think that if
it's worth the price to you.
Not every price and not every statement. I mean, there are things that are worth different risks. I'll give you an example from the Temple Mount myself. So one of the police officers once told me that I'm not allowed to sing the Tikva, the Israeli national anthem, on the Temple Mount when I was doing it, which, by the way, is illegal to say because there is no law against singing the national anthem anywhere. And even in the briefings, they say no religious worship, and a Tikva is obviously a secular song. And the next time I did it, I knew they're going to kick me out, and they did, and I couldn't enter the Temple Mount for more than 2 months. But I was willing to take that risk because I thought that insisting on my right to do that was more important than the 2 months that I'm going to be removed from the site, or
Yeah, you took the risk. But when you take the risk of, I don't know, conquering, this is what we're talking about, right? We need to conquer the
we
Temple
don't
Mount.
need to conquer. We control it. There are Israeli police officers on the Temple Mount every single day.
We need to implement our sovereignty over Temple Mount.
Yes.
So the price,
I think the risk of not doing it is way higher.
Could be. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'm saying in the Middle East, when you do such a thing, you never know what's the price you're going to pay.
100%.
Things escalate so quickly, and you can find yourself in an all-out war in the north, in the south, and it'll be too late to step back. So you got to presume the worst.
I agree. I agree, and I think the risk of what's going to happen is worth taking, because I think the risk of what will happen if we won't do that is way graver and more probable.
Eitan, what do you think?
I mean, you know my opinion. I generally I agree with you. I'm playing devil's advocate to push back a bit, and B, there are, I think, nuances which maybe I differ. I wonder if I guess timing is one of them. Like, would you advocate that tomorrow the government implement its sovereignty?
What do you mean by implementing sovereignty?
Meaning pass legislation that Jews can, or whatever it is. I don't know if it's legislation or if it's like bylaws or what it is, but like pass whatever needs to be passed and say Jews are allowed on Temple Mount whenever they want. Have politicians make, you know, like PR visits to the Temple Mount, like, you know, just like
put
Jews,
thousands of cops there to
and put thousands
enforce.
of cops to enforce and tell the Waqf, like, go fuck yourselves. You're here administratively. You can't tell us what to do.
So I think the funny or sad part, whatever way you want to look at it, is that there is no law or bylaw saying that we can't be there. Until the Second Intifada, the Temple Mount was opened on Saturdays and Fridays, and Jews were allowed to enter pretty much freely.
So who implemented that rule and who enforces it?
So the police enforces it,
and
obviously.
The Waqf implemented it.
Yeah, and they just gave us a sign and said, you know, we don't want you here. After the Second Intifada, the Temple Mount was closed hermetically for Jews for 3 years. And when it reopened very gradually, and we experienced that graduality that hasn't changed much since.
It's ironic that Sharon, who allegedly caused the Intifada, he was the prime minister in the next 3 years, right?
Yeah,
so he
and
was
it's also
the one
ironic that Sharon, who built settlements, was the one to evacuate them later. I think Sharon is
a riddle.
It's not a riddle. It's an opportunist, but okay.
Yeah. My point is, I guess I would advocate gradual change.
I agree with you.
And leveraging, leveraging specific moments to implement drastic change. So I think maybe in wartime, kind of like we conquered the Golan Heights and the territories during the 1967 war, use those moments where everything is already gone to shit to take over and say, this is it. There's a new sheriff in town.
First of all, it could be a part of a system of sticks and carrots, and saying, you started a war, and now the stick is that Jews are going to be allowed more freely into the Temple Mount, definitely. But also, I think a more substantial and important statement is that obviously you can't do it all in a day, and you shouldn't do it all in a day. It should be a gradual change, and even more than me caring about what they are going to think or what they're going to do, I'm thinking of my own people. I think there's going to be there are going to be objections inside my society within Israeli Jewry, saying you shouldn't be doing this. I think there should be a lot of work done to get public support before you do anything. I think that nobody is going to object to opening the Temple Mount 6 or 7 hours a day for Jews instead of 5. But if you say now, well, on Fridays, we open it freely while, hundreds of thousands of Muslims are praying their Friday prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque, that's going to be an issue. I think everything should be gradual. And I don't want to put in risk those Jewish worshippers who would want to go onto the Temple Mount.
Yeah, I think there needs to be strict enforcement of whatever the current rule is, and along with gradual change. So I think the idea that specific politicians are stopped or even delayed in their ascension to the Temple Mount is just ridiculous.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
So let's talk about Colombia a little bit. So you were there for 5 years.
5 years.
So we care obviously about your education, but even more about I don't know.
What do you get out of it?
I thought it would be polite. Oh, we get an avid future prime minister, maybe. Or
okay. Why maybe?
But but even more like the whole Israel situation in the campuses, and you were there during the war, actually, right? Or were you
so
here?
I was here, but still, leading my campus group over there. It was during COVID, so nobody was like really there.
Right. But like, did you see a trend over those 5 years in Colombia?
Yes. And I'm going to surprise you. I don't necessarily think it's a negative trend. I think what I understood during these 5 years is, and I'm not going to say that I changed people's views. It's not the case, unfortunately. But I think that I discovered there's a lot to be done that we just don't do because we think it's hopeless to begin with. During my time at Columbia, my group, Students Supporting Israel, we did so many things that we thought were impossible. For example, Colombia decided to host Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, who is the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He calls himself a proud anti-Semite. And Colombia hosted him during the Global Leaders Forum that takes place during the General Assembly. And we emailed the president of Colombia, and we said, we understand this person is coming here in 2 days. We want you to cancel his appearance, but if you don't, the least you can do is calling out on being an anti-Semite on stage. And guess what? The moderator actually did. And she went up on stage and said, in front of the prime minister and in front of the entire stage, and said, this person is an anti-Semite.
Unlike Olaf Schulz a few days ago.
Yes. And that shows that even the students who, you look at us and you see a bunch of students, but we do have power to change. And I think that's a really important trend.
But amongst the students.
And I think it's the same amongst the students. Look, and my final semester at Columbia, in graduate school, we brought with an organization called iTrack to Israel 3 full buses from the SIPA School of Columbia, the School of International Public Affairs. 150 students who chose to do their spring break, and they were paying. It was not free. 150 students who came here to Israel and paid a nice amount of money to learn about Jewish history and about their connection to the land. And it's possible. And you know what? When we asked them before the trip, their top interests in Israel so we can build the itinerary, the conflict was number 4. And these are international affairs students. Okay? What I learned is people care less and less about this issue because they see that Israel is so much more than just a conflict. And I think
what was number 1?
So if I remember correctly, it was history and culture.
Getting hooked up.
It was history and culture. And then it was like food and architecture. I was really surprised. And we came here, and what they were talking about is wanting to hear more about the sustainability scene in Israel. And we talked about the conflict through sustainability. We brought a representative from an organization that does water conservation, and that's the way they connect Jordanians and Israelis and Syrians through their shared issues with the lack of water. And people were way more interested in that than in hearing someone, some politician with a tie and suit talk to them about the conflict. So I think there's a really positive trend.
Cool. Very
cool. It was very cool.
So you left your, on
a high note.
On a high note, you left those.
Are you going back for a PhD?
Maybe in the future if I'm bored. I'm not bored currently, so we're good. But yeah, no, I really think that we're being very pessimistic for no reason. Well, for a good reason, but I think
maybe it's worse in Harvard.
No, I think that the issue is that we let our pessimism prevent us from even trying sometimes. And there's a lot to be done. I think it's a chronic disease with Jews where we think that it's all about us. But most people don't really care about us. Their lives revolve around so many other things that are not related to Israel or Judaism. My, fellow students from Colombia or Brazil or, even Pakistan, they have other things to worry about. And when you talk to them and you bring them to Israel, by the way, one of the students on the trip was a Muslim from India, a very observant Muslim who on his free time went to Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray. And when we went out from the Temple Mount, the day we all ascended together, he showed me pictures of the foundation rock that he took inside the Omar Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. And I said, it's ironic. I've been here maybe 50 times and I'm not allowed to enter and see that. And he looked at me and said, in full seriousness, he said, you know what? It is ironic. I will pray that one day we can be there together. And that's a person who came on the trip convinced that Israel is an apartheid state. And I'm pretty sure he came to ruin the trip for other people. And now we're friends and we're talking a lot.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I think it's about the people eventually. Most of them don't have set opinions, even if they think they do.
Okay, I want to get to the spicy stuff.
Let's do it.
You ready?
Yes,
Politics.
always. Let's do it.
So you supported Gideon Sa'ar.
I did.
In the last elections. If you guys don't know, Gideon Sa'ar, he was Likud for decades, and then he quit Likud, took some people with him, formed a party called New Hope, and he declared he's ONB, only not Bibi. Or not only not Bibi is the direct. Yeah, I guess it's not. It works less well in English.
It doesn't work in Hebrew as well.
Yeah.
It's a shitty ideology, but okay.
And
no, but the initials work.
Yeah.
Galab.
And and so he joined the change government with Bennett, and what did you think when he did that move? And
which one? Starting the party or joining the government?
From the beginning of his...
Look, I believed, and I still believe, that the one person in the Israeli Knesset that is most loyal to the values that I grew up on, the ideology led by my spiritual leader, Zev Jabotinsky, is Gideon Sa'ar. I still believe that. I think that in the name of political survival, he sometimes does not follow the direct ideology that he believes in. And I do not regret supporting him in the first elections. I can't vote for him now because he joined forces with Benny Gantz. And first of all, he has legit communists on his list, like Alon Schuster and people like that. But also because I don't trust Gantz to be prime minister.
Why?
I doubt his ability to make, the good decisions that the government needs to make in these critical moments where Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon and the United States is giving us a prize that it's going to take 6 months and not 2 weeks. I really think we need someone who's more not just experienced, but more able to make those cold-hearted decisions. I don't think that's Gantz.
But if Gideon Sa'ar has these values, how come he's now running together with the complete opposite? It's very extreme.
Yes, I think political survival is very scary for some people. The prospect of not being in the next Knesset, that's what's going to happen to his party, got the best of him. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think that's irresponsible. I think that supporting someone like Benny Gantz to be prime minister is not the right decision.
But doesn't it mean...
Maybe he's a liar.
Yeah.
Maybe
he
never had those values.
Purports to have those
Look,
values.
Gideon Sa'ar is in the political system for a very, very long time. I think he has been very consistent with his values so far. But again, I believe in values, not in people. If comes a person that I feel represents my values in a better way, great.
But the way you represent values is through actions.
Right, and I think...
So if he wasn't running with Benny Gantz this election, you would
thus
still vote for him?
I think thus far he represented these values in a very good way. I would say, though, that sitting in the same government with Ram was definitely a breach of those values.
And with Meretz?
Not as much, because I think Meretz, in the end of the day, I disagree with them on almost anything, but they define themselves as a Zionist party. Most of them.
But I mean, the communists on Gant's list bother you. So I mean, the Meretz guys have.
Well,
to
I
bother
wouldn't
you.
vote for Meretz either. Obviously, I think the issue is sitting with Ram is again giving a prize to those who support terror, and you can't hide it. People who are slated on Ram's list visited families of terrorists, and they consulted them. Like that's not
But I'm trying
legitimate.
to understand the line. So you don't want him to run with someone that's a communist, but afterwards to form a coalition
Well,
with
you
them,
need to form a coalition. That's the political game in Israel. I think we should change the system, but that's the system. You need to
but you don't
collaborate
necessarily
with.
need communists.
Well, you need to collaborate with someone you disagree on. That's
but
the
not
political
that
system.
stark of a disagreement.
Well, I wish it wasn't as stark as a disagreement, but there are communists on Benny Gantz's list.
No,
but
isn't
Benny
he
Gantz,
closer to Bibi though than he
I-
is with
I
Meretz?
think
Shouldn't
he
he have
is
sat with
closer to-
Bibi? Do you not think that his only not Bibi stance?
Oh,
was a mistake?
100%.
So
I think, and I said it many times publicly and to him, that I think that leading with that line of not Bibi, and that's the most important thing, is A, ridiculous, B, not smart, C, destructive.
maybe it is smart.
Maybe
Maybe it's the only reason he got the votes that he got.
I don't think so. I voted for him for a variety of different reasons, and most of the people I know who voted for him they voted for him despite that fact and not because of that fact. If they wanted to vote for that fact, they had a bunch of other parties to vote for. And I think that leading with that line, you can say, I don't think Bibi should be prime minister, and that's a completely legitimate stance. But making it your leading ideology is ridiculous, and I think, by the way, eventually also politically unwise. And you see that he almost did not pass the threshold before he joined forces with Gantz, because people are tired of hearing about Bibi. Even if they like him and if they dislike him, they just want someone to care about their rising rent.
Yeah, but I don't
not
think,
about Bibi.
I think him not passing the threshold was less about the fact that he said not Bibi, because that he did pass the threshold with that on his ticket the first time around. It's more about the fact that he betrayed his voters.
I don't know if betrayed is maybe. I am.
How did he betray his voters?
By
With
sitting
sitting
in
with
a,
Ram.
in a government
with
that's
Ram.
made up of but it's made up of left wing.
Look, I
mean, it was a left wing.
I don't like the
government.
word betrayal on anyone. I rarely use it, if at all. I do think that the fact that he made not Bibi his lead theme and almost forgot about all the other things that were so important to him before the election. Yes, it drove out
Evaporated.
voter. Yeah, it evaporated. Like, what about the judicial system? That was his leading ticket,
that
and he
I wanted to
completely
talk to
forgot
you
about it.
because even in the government,
Yes.
he became a puppet of the system. For people who don't know, Sar became the minister of judiciary of justice, and the main thing that he found himself in an extremely powerful, crossroads. Once
100%.
every 8 years, I think, or 7 years, you need to choose a new
Supreme Court justice.
No, not the Supreme Court. The
Attorney General.
He's not really Attorney General. Never mind. We talked about
He's
it.
also an attorney.
He's also
And
Attorney
the state
General
prosecutor.
and the state prosecutor. And he chose a very, very problematic person.
They also chose justices, though, right?
Yes.
They also chose.
I don't know
dozens
her.
of justice. No, but she is famously unfit for the role. She came
I
from
don't know.
nowhere. Nobody knows who she is, and she does everything that the system tells her to do. We see it now, I think, very vividly.
Well, I would not comment on that because I feel like I don't know her past well enough to judge on that. But I would say that when someone like Gideon Sa'ar leads his entire campaign with, I am going to separate the two roles state prosecutor and public attorney, like, and you don't do any of it. You don't even try. You don't do any. It evaporated after the elections, and I think it's sad. I think one thing that was
Which
really
makes you think, why?
what was really disappointing for me is the fact that he used Sharon Esquel, I think she's an incredible member of Knesset, and he used her legislation to ease medical cannabis to get voters. And then it was just, when she proposed it, they abandoned her. And they let her fight on her own and fail every single time because the coalition did not support her.
But his promise to break the role of the Attorney General into two, that would, if it were to be done, it would completely change the system.
Right.
And he didn't even talk about it. So
he should have.
After he was elected to the office.
I'm not voting for him, obviously. So that's one of the reasons.
But I can't help but think, like, I if you ask me, he's afraid, he's deterred,
I don't know. Maybe not.
I don't see another reason.
For someone who has almost zero political power, we've been talking about him for a very long time.
But I do want to. I want to go back to the spicier stuff.
Okay.
Which is the word betrayal, which you seemed a bit like put off by, and I wonder why.
Because I think in the Jewish context, betrayal has a very specific meaning, and it's very clear what you do with traitors. And I think it's
but betrayal doesn't imply traitor.
Well, in the Israeli context, and when you translate it to Hebrew, it does.
It's the same word.
It's the same word, boged, and it's very clear what you do to them.
But it's also, there's a difference between saying someone bagad and someone boged. Because boged implies that is the quality that defines that person's character.
I wish people would be as subtle and as like fine tuning of every single term like you. Unfortunately, in the Israeli context, it doesn't work this way. And I think that
I
there are a lot of
that's true. I think people are careful with their words, and I think
that's how I experience it. And that's the reason. That's the reason I avoid using that word. And I think there's a lot of other very strong words to describe what they did.
Traitors betray,
but you can be a traitor without being you can
betray without being a traitor.
Not in Hebrew.
No, you can be a betrayer without being a traitor legally. Like you can not have
but it's not a legal discussion.
You cannot have betrayed your country and betrayed your voters.
Yes, but in the Israeli context and in
the
current political system, it's very mixed up. And I think there's a variety of other ways to describe what they did. They deceived their voters. They cheated them. They stole their votes. Betrayal.
How would you say they cheated them in Hebrew?
Rimu.
Okay.
That seems to me a bit I'm
a nuanced person.
Letting
that is what it is.
It's not nuanced. I think it's letting them off the hook. These people committed, in my eyes, a despicable act.
I agree. I totally agree.
So
I just don't think
cheating is not despicable.
But in the Israeli context,
betrayal
is something
cheating is not despicable.
Right, but in the Israeli context, betrayal is something like collaborating with the enemy, and as I don't see Meretz as my enemy.
But Ram is. And they collaborated with Ram.
That's true.
Yeah, it's a
the terrorists are my enemy. The members of Knesset are not.
Even Ram. It's
tough question.
It's a tough question. Okay.
I think we should get comfortable with the idea that they betrayed their voters, because I think that's what politicians.
So far, I'm not. So
I think politicians are tasked with one job and one job only, which is to say they're going to do something and then do that. And that's what representation is to listen to you and then do what you said. So if you don't do that, you have fundamentally like torn down the core of your job.
Yes.
And that's a betrayal.
All of that with the exception of the word betrayal, it's exactly what I would say about them. 100%. I just think in the Jewish-Israeli context, betrayal.
It's interesting because when a husband or a partner cheats his wife, in Hebrew, you call it a traitor.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't collaborate with the enemy.
Well, true.
Not every other woman is an enemy of my wife. But if I slept with any woman, I would be a traitor because I betrayed the core function of my responsibility.
Luckily, Israelis still differentiate between the two terms of like betraying on your wife and betraying your country.
Well,
Yeah.
not all women though. Some of them might hang you in there
That I don't know.
Without a trial.
without a trial.
But are you a part of, like, what's your thoughts about the government? Are you opposed to a government with Netanyahu?
I will say this. I'm not opposed to a government with Netanyahu. I do not think he should be prime minister. I think there are worse things than him being prime minister. I think the world is way more nuanced than this. I don't think it's either he's, alleging the best thing that ever happened since sliced bread, or he is, a traitor and should be thrown into jail. There's something in between. He might be the better of a few evils, not two. And I think that, in my ideal government, he wouldn't be prime minister, but I understand that, the world doesn't work this way. Sometimes the government is not going to be my ideal one, and he will be prime minister. And I recognize that there are at least 1 million Israeli citizens who want him to be prime minister. Who am I to tell them that he shouldn't? If you ask my moral compass, yeah, he should step aside and clear his name and then come back with a bang and be prime minister again. And I think he should dedicate his time fully to clearing his name and then coming back for himself, but for Israel as well.
Don't the million voters say otherwise? I mean, isn't it his responsibility to
yes,
to
and
be
I
their
can disagree
representative?
with them. I'm not going to tell them what to think. I don't think they're immoral. I think we don't have the same opinion on this issue. And I ideally would like the prime minister he's leading my country to be someone who is not being doubted.
No, but I'm saying something else. I'm saying once the facts on the ground are that I have 1 million votes, isn't it my responsibility as a public figure to
100%.
not put aside the country and deal with my political issues?
Yes, with the
my,
exception
legal
that the Israeli system is not a personal election system. So it's not real. They chose Likud.
Yeah, but if he were to step aside, I mean, come on, Likud wouldn't get the same amount of
I'm not
votes.
sure. I know people who voted Likud and would have preferred someone else from the Likud heading the party.
I think if Bibi wasn't heading the Likud, they would get 35, 36 mandates.
No.
So how many left?
But I wouldn't think they would get 5. I think there is a margin of people who would still vote Likud.
That's an
if it
interesting
was-
question, because then that's like the people who voted Bibi. So how many do you think they are?
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
No, it's a...
I'm sure there's a
The
survey on that.
question-
No? Like, who would you vote for Likud without Bibi?
Look, in the primaries, last time he ran against Gideon Sa'ar in the primaries.
30 to 70 or
Yeah,
something
30
like
to
that. So
70.
there's at least 30% of the Likud who preferred Gideon Sa'ar to Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay.
So even if we go safe and we say 50%, so it's half a
Well,
million, 600,000, 700,000
and
people.
and it's almost 50% of the people who are voting for this party.
Yeah.
So that's not a negligible number of people.
No, absolutely.
And that was only Gideon Sa'ar. There are people who maybe wanted Nir Barkat or Yuli Edelstein or, I don't know, God forbid, Israel Katz. I don't know.
No, but I think what I'm saying, I guess, is if it's 600-700 people, then like as an individual, if you
100,000.
carry what? No, not 100,000.
He has a responsibility to them, 100%. I just don't think that's the reason that he's staying.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Fair enough.
And I think his responsibility as a prime minister, there's two things. As a head of party, and he is responsible for his voters, 100%. But when you're a prime minister, you don't only represent your voters. You represent an entire country. And for the sake of this country, I think he has a bigger responsibility. And that's clearing his name and not dragging Israel into this mud fight with the international scene, the international media, and making Israel look like a banana republic.
But I think he looks at it. I mean, I differ there because
Well, he obviously doesn't see it the same way.
I won't get it. I won't go into his motivations, but I can clearly see that. I mean, I could clearly say that it's a very high likelihood that the way he sees things is that if he's not leading the country, things are much worse off.
Okay. Yes, I believe that that's what he believes. Not necessarily what I believe.
Okay.
Would
Fair
you
enough.
like? I won't ask you who you're gonna vote for, but would you?
Well,
share
you can. I don't know.
You don't. So that's what I want to ask. Like, can you share with us like your main? It's just interesting the dilemma.
Well, I wish I had a dilemma. I really, honestly, it's really hard for me to say.
There's no one to vote for.
I'm a member of Likud for many years.
Mhm.
I voted in the primaries. You know, I would have preferred Gidon to stay in the Likud instead of running separately if he was elected to lead the Likud. That did not happen. I can't hide that I struggle with the current people in the Likud. And I think some of them are not representing what the Likud should be. When you say the Likud is a national liberal party and there are members of Knesset in the Likud who want to ban parts of the internet and give subsidies to people to have as many children as they can, like that's not a liberal party. When you object gay marriage, you are not liberal. and to me, it's an issue.
There are also not quite a few liberals in the list.
100%. And I think that's a very good, that's good news. The fact that Amir Ohana is number 5 on the list is a very good news for the liberals.
Yeah. Okay. So you came back.
And I'm just going to summarize. I wish that one day I would be 100% comfortable voting Likud, that it would once again be the National Liberal Party with people who are truly national and liberal. And I don't think it contradicts each other.
I think we're all gonna compromise.
100%, we are.
It's inevitable. I was just texting Eitan today, but about another party he was considering.
You can say.
The Hatzionut Hadatit, Smotrich. He was contemplating. We talked about it, and they had primaries now. And the guy who came first place, Ofir Dayan, he's famously a lobbyist for the agricultural lobby. So he's against importing vegetables
lowering
and fruits
customs.
and lowering costumes. So I sent a tweet about it to Eitan, and I was like, oh well, you can cross them off your list.
Also cross Shaked, who I don't think she was on your list to begin with.
Yeah,
but
Shaked, no, she was on my list. She was in last place. But only because Bennett wasn't there. I voted Bennett. That's why I have the.
I totally get it. And if I was a Bennett voter, his one sole promise was not to sit in a government with Ram, I would freak out.
Yeah, but I do think that. In the end, I mean, you sent me that text. In the end, you have to, like you said,
compromise.
There's nobody that I'm going to vote for that I'm going to be, and that's
for the liberal Smotrich. That's a good compromise.
But he is rather liberal. I think. I mean, at least if I go according to what he says,
which is a risk.
Someone very smart said 30 minutes ago that you go by what you do, not what you say.
Yeah, but he hasn't had too many opportunities. I mean. To prove himself in those arenas. I actually
like him, but yeah.
But what I'm saying is a lot of Israelis and generally a lot of people try and stand behind. They pick a person and then they try and stand behind everything that person does, or they try and stand behind even an ideology. And I think it's just you have to make a priority list, decide what's most important.
100%. You need to fit that with reality. I grew up in Beitar. We sing 2 banks to the Jordan River. Both of them are ours. I'm not going to storm into Transjordan tomorrow morning and conquer Amman.
Actually, that's
not a bad idea. I think we would handle it better. But in the end of the day, I can say that's a vision. That's a dream. It's incompatible with reality. So I'm not going to advocate for it.
Currently.
Still gotta sing the song though.
Of course.
Great
it's a nice song.
Very nice song.
So your NGO
Beyadenu.
Can people donate
Of
to the
course,
cause?
they can donate. They can donate by a standing order. They can do a one-time donation. We even have bead, and it's, wait for it, fully tax deductible in Israel and the US.
And the US.
And the US.
Wow.
So you can go to Beyadenu, Google us, and you can donate. There's a link on our Facebook page, on our Instagram page, on our Twitter. And not less important, first, donate, okay? First of all, donate. But second of all, after you donate, we also give free tours of the Temple Mount. Free of charge completely. In Hebrew, in English, sometimes in French. So there's a link there also, and you can just reserve a tour
How much in advance you need to...
whenever you want. We have guides there every single day.
Okay. Very cool.
Very.
Awesome.
And you're on social media.
Yes, and you should follow me, not just Beyadenu.
Yeah.
So Ofir Dayan 94 on Instagram and Twitter.
Ofir with an F.
With an F. Yes. PH is like, who are you?
It's despicable, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, anything else we need to plug?
No, I
good?
think we're good.
Okay. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
It
for
was so
having
much
me again.
fun.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
And happy you're back in Israel.
Me too.
Guys, we opened a Patreon, so go to patreon.com/2njb and help us out. Rate us 5 stars on Spotify. Follow us on YouTube to see us.
Tell all your friends about us.
Yes, friends, family. Yeah. And
Family too.
And
Even-
just like random people on the street.
Random people.
yes.
Hold signs up.
For sure. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.